Thank you, Victor. I think that also our gratitude to the Observatory and our partners. This is a tremendously important time for this conversation. I think brand at the center of this conversation, but two other very important words, reputation and trust. Edelman believes that reputation is what you have accrued. Every action or inaction that you as an enterprise have taken over time accrues to what is your reputation. You do not own your reputation. It is what you have earned. Your brand is what you're possible of accomplishing. It's what your consumer thinks you're capable of as an enterprise. And we believe a very important intersection in those two notions, the notion of reputation, the notion of brand, is very importantly trust. I think we're going to look at a lot of numbers, trust me. I'll try to make them as simple as possible. But I would be very clear that a word that was shared earlier, Victor, was passion. Passion is a lot of what we as marketing communications professionals aspire to create, the experience. So while these are rational numbers around a very emotional topic of trust, and trust today matters more, I would argue, than at any other time in my career as a corporate communications professional. Today's Wall Street Journal Europe edition, obviously the English version, my Spanish begins and ends at hola. NSA tapping poses threat to USA firms. Will the EU countries continue to allow US technology companies to operate freely? They don't trust them for good reason. In Europe, banks look to cross borders to expand. Who's going to let them in? Are they trusted? Euro gains grounds as a haven currency. The trust in government, the trust in the EU as a monetary entity. Extremely important, extremely relevant, extremely timely. And for us as marketing communications professionals, we at Edelman believe extremely important to recognize that the world has fundamentally changed. And largely, our business leaders for whom we work don't necessarily understand this. Meaning that our first job, I believe, is education. Many of today's business leaders came into their corner office because they were great at operational efficiency. They were great at maximization of margin. And they began their careers in which what we call at Edelman the pyramid of authority, a very traditional shaped pyramid, CEO at top, mass consumer at bottom, is how the world functioned. When I began my career, I would get a phone call, here's the news, go tell it. That's what I would do. Very glamorous job. Today's world, we think, the pyramid of authority has been mirrored by a pyramid of community, in which a very minority voice can explode across social media and can impact the ability of enterprise to move forward. Certainly those articles on the front page of the paper are transcending all channels of communications today. So while we'll look at numbers, I think we have to remember as marketing communications professionals that these two pyramids come together to form the diamond of influence, that's our term at Edelman, for the world in which we are operating and communicating. And our first job is to help educate our business leaders around this new reality, this diamond. And largely as marketing communication professionals, we trust our gut. We know that's the right thing to do. Business leaders don't trust our gut. They trust data. So I thank Victor for his setup because I think that there was great synergies between the model that you talked about and what we've seen here in terms of behavioral operational examination of trust and how it will drive the business forward. I'll also ask the patience of my fellow colleagues on the stage because I can't stand behind this podium or I may explode. For 14 years, Edelman has looked at this issue of trust. Again, an extremely complicated topic that we simply try to bring down to some finer points. Our look at this for the past 14 years took a change 3 years ago when we began to survey general population in addition to informed publics. I would be very clear that there are some terms in our presentation today that I should define at the outset to set the stage. General population, probably not for us marketing communication professionals the best word, in the sense that in order to participate in the Edelman Trust Barometer, you must have access to a computer. We field our survey instrument through a computer interface. I dare say that the average general public in India does not necessarily have access to a computer. So you'll want to bear in mind that skew. Informed publics is an Edelman construct. It's our terminology. It's 25 to 64, college educated, top 25% of household, and they self-report significant media consumption. We don't quantify that. I don't say, do you read 5 or more articles a week? I simply say, are you a big consumer of, and you say yes, and therefore you move forward in the survey. We believe that these informed publics are largely precursors of public opinion. We also think that for marketing communications professionals, these are largely influencers who shape dialogue, who shape debate, who lead conversation on Twitter or at cocktail parties. So for actionable insights, we will focus more on this informed public. As we move through these slides, you will see this icon or this icon in the upper right-hand corner, which will give you a sense of what group we're looking at. If there is no flag in the upper corner, that represents global findings from 27 countries in which we field this survey, the largest survey on trust of its kind in the world. And if we are looking at Spain-specific findings, you'll find your country flag up here as well. So for 14 years, we've looked at this topic, adding markets every year. The 27th market, which we added last year, was South Africa. And every year, we come up with a summary finding. Today, we're going to talk about how the data supports this notion of business's opportunity to lead a conversation, a context setting, opportunity for business, for brands, to talk about the macro, which is extremely important. So let's start with a look at the state of trust. For 14 years, we have looked at this notion of trust through the lens of 4 institutions: NGO, business, media, and government. We do not define those terms in our instrument. So when we ask the question in the instrument, we say, how much do you trust a non-governmental organization, or how much do you trust the media to do what is right? You see, the most trusted institution in the world for 2 years now, and really for a great duration of our study, is NGOs at 64%. Business is second at 58%, same year over year, with the media dropping 5 points down to 52, and government dropping 4 points down to 48. Government was already at a low point, but it continues to decline. Let's look at your numbers by comparison in terms of this market. NGOs up 4 to 59% trust. Media down 10 from 50 to 40% trust in media. Business down 6 points year over year. And your government, while already at a low of 20, this past year dropped 2 more points to 18. The headlines that Victor showed us, the life experiences that you have, what you have lived through for the past 4 years would largely illuminate these. I'm more of an expert on our global findings, so I won't dare to theorize on the depth of understanding that you have behind these numbers, but I would encourage us to think about these in relationship. That article on today's New York Wall Street Journal about the opportunity of technology companies to work in other countries speaks to the importance of the intersection of trust between business and government. Government sets the stage and creates the opportunity for business to thrive or not thrive. And largely that regulation or that deregulation is based on the trusted nature or lack of trust. I agree, Victor, on the importance of that in the brand and the behavior of the enterprise. Here's a look at your market data on a 6-year trend line basis. We see NGOs riding across the top for the entirety of that study. And look at business in the purple here, moving up to 54 in 2010 on the year after the global economic reset. And then 2011 to 2012, that very dramatic 21-point drop. Last year, a rebound of 12 points to this year seeing a fall of 6. By contrast, the governmental trust in the Spain market remains low, 20, 20, and 18 respectively over the last 3 years. A very striking picture as it relates to the intersection between government and business, something we'll talk a lot about. This is we call the trust index, very scientific. We add these 4 numbers up and we divide by 4. And that shows us what I would say is not the winner, with all due respect to His Royal Highness of the UAE, who tweeted from Davos that the UAE had won the trust barometer, but a predisposition of a people to trust when they wake up, when they get out of bed. How trusting are they? This is not bad and good. This is simply the state of trust in a market through the lens of those 4 institutions, remember. Here you can see 2013 to 2014, again, informed public, and you can look at the movement of Spain down 3 points overall. Again, this is informed public. If we contrast informed to general, and again, you'll remember general is predicated on access to a computer, as opposed to the movement or the comparison of 36 to 39, what I would encourage you to look at on this slide is the preponderance, the great amount of red ink on this side. General public, far less trusting globally. Far less trusting globally. As marketing communications professionals, an extremely important reality for us to think about as we wake up and begin our jobs. This is the predisposition of that citizenry to trust or not to trust. So our job is to understand the starting point and build from there. So let's look at those 4 institutions. There's no way you can read all the numbers on this slide. I'll try to make this simple. Here's your numbers. This we had already looked at. The year over year, 2013 to 2014, up 4 points. The blue represents from 2013 to 2014 the number of markets that increased year over year, while the red represents the numbers of markets in which trust in NGOs decreased. In 20 of 27 markets surveyed, NGOs remain the most trusted institution. For business, an extremely important factor. If I am going to be successful in my endeavor, are there NGOs with whom I can partner, with whom I should dialogue, with whom I should discuss my business plans, my impacts on community, my commitment to purpose, etc. NGOs are a very powerful voice in 20 of 27 markets, and certainly year over year, as economic instability continues, NGOs remain trusted. Media, by contrast, in almost 3/4 of the markets that we surveyed, over 3/4 actually, it is lower or equal in 21 of the 27 markets. In Spain, we saw a 10-point drop. I would point out 2 theories behind this decrease. Number 1 is the definition of the word media. Yesterday was the 10th anniversary of Facebook. We asked this question 14 years ago. There was no Facebook. There is no doubt that 14 years later, Facebook is a part of my concept of media, number 1. Number 2, what is the expectation of media in a society, right? Look at this. China, 79% trust in media. Do you believe that number? What's the role of media in China? For us in developed, established markets, where we have a notion of free press, our expectation is that media will shine a light on injustice, will monitor for bad behavior, will create accountability. When that doesn't happen, perhaps we see a 10-point drop. But if we grow up with the knowledge that the media is state-owned, that the media is a mouthpiece, that the media is advancing my opportunity, because for the first time in my life of my family, I have a computer, I have a car, I'm a part of an emerging middle class, I actually might trust my media a great deal. So you have to think as marketing communications professionals, what is the role of media within a society? Don't assume that your definition of these terms, of terms like media, which seem so strikingly universal, are always the same, because they're not. And we looked also in marketing globally at the trust in Edelman's segmentation, the way we think about the media landscape. We think of the media landscape as traditional, certainly that Wall Street Journal that I just held up. Hybrid, those emerging channels online who have journalists who report social, Facebook, Twitter, and owned, Edelman.com, GE.com. And at the center of these four types of media, we believe sits search and content, driving out into those four. So we asked, through our lens, of what was the trust in those four types of media. Look at the respondents in Spain. 59%, highest of any of the five, place trust in search. But as marketing communications professionals, it's not that simple. I woke up this morning, I looked at my Facebook page. Populated with people like me, typically, right? I don't want people not like me on my Facebook page, right? Someone shared a story. I thought that story was interesting. I clicked from my Facebook page to that story. That was interesting. I want more information. I searched on it. That company is doing something really interesting. Wonder how they would explain it. So we have to think about the media consumption process to also make sense of these numbers. I would say that too often companies, brands are not paying enough attention to owned. In today's world, in a world in which your peer sets say they do not trust, look at the trust in owned media. It is a source. It must be managed. Now we're going to look at business. For us, very transparently, this is a nice study, but it's also a business driver. So I want to be transparent that we look a great deal at trust in business, at the causes behind trust in business, and we look at the intersection between trust in business and trust in government, because we think that's extremely relevant for what we do as marketing communications professionals. Here you see that drop that we talked about previously of 6 points in Spain, and you see a pretty solid split. 12 countries went up in trust, 15 countries went down. I talked earlier about His Royal Highness in the UAE. He had a very good year, almost 20 points uptick. Why? It's extremely important to understand the context in which the respondents are interacting with the instrument. The 2030 plan, as launched by the government of the UAE, is about creating a sustainable economy for that people. This past year, many milestones in that plan were celebrated publicly. So the sense of accomplishment, the sense of business, which is driven obviously by the government here, extremely important. Hong Kong, 11-point drop in business, plagued by scandal. Fukushima, which was referenced in the previous presentation, was one of the most dramatic moments in time for our trust barometer. The trust barometer out of Japan in the fall after Fukushima showed a collapse of trust across all four institutions. Media had not created accountability or shared information. NGOs had not come to the rescue of the citizenry. TEPCO, as a private enterprise with government subsidy, had been very less than transparent in terms of what had happened, and the governmental response was deemed inadequate. So we must contextualize this. And we must also understand from Edelman's perspective that there are four drivers, four biases, that you will, that create trust or denigrate trust as it relates to business specifically. We look at these four factors. We look at industry from which the company comes. All industries are not trusted the same. We look at the country of origin, the enterprise type, and the CEO leadership. So let's dive in. This is a question that we've asked for a number of years. This is global, no flag, global findings from informed public, 2009 to 2014. Candidly, the difference between 2013 and 2014 showed such very little change that we wanted to take this longer look. If we had backed up to 2006, banks, which you see here on the left at 47%, would have been middle of the pack in the upper 50s. So while we see a 4% increase year over year for banks from 47 to 51, we still know that there's a reset. We like to say that banks at the bottom are the new normal, right? Compare that to automotive. We're going to hear from someone in the automotive industry later. A 12-point increase. Our theory on that, several drivers. Dramatic increase in the U.S., where you had bailouts of our automobile manufacturers where they've repaid that money with interest, where you have tremendous innovation and integration of technology into the product line in a way that we have not historically seen, where we have greater efficiencies being realized in the way composites are being brought to bear in the manufacturing process, where we have emerging middle class in India, in China, who for the first time now have a car. So an experience of wealth, a manifestation of wealth, right? So again, circumstantially, globally, we see that 12-point uptick. Technology has always been at the top of our list. Let's look at 3 specific industries within your country: the financial services industry, the food and beverage industry, and the energy industry. 24% trust in financial services, 21% for banks, 37% for credit cards. So even within an industry sector, the point being of this slide is we see volatility with the way the subcategories are trusted or not. Important starting points for brands, important starting points for marketing communications professionals in the way that we think about programming that will drive business forward. Look at the difference in the trust for an oil brand, an oil company, versus a renewables company. It's not editorial, it's what the numbers say. Again, our business leaders need facts as starting point. We believe this creates a good fact to start a conversation about what is necessary. Here's a look at market data from Spain for an expanded list of industries, 2013 to 2014. Your big mover, energy, 48 to 36, down 12 points. High prices, as I understand it, a significant driver in that. Look at banks remaining 6 points down at 16. 16 for banks, 68 for entertainment and technology. A 52-point spread in the starting point of trust for a brand, for an enterprise, depending upon the industry from which they come. Industry, an extremely important factor. Second factor, country of origin. What is that national identity of the company, of the brand? Most trusted multinational in the world, a German multinational. 8 in 10 global respondents say they trust a German multinational. 1 in 3 trust a multinational based in Mexico. Spain, the most trusted non-BRIC. The least trusted developed market, Western market, at 53, with South Korea and Italy. In the middle of the pack, if you will. This 50% line you often see on these slides is just a reference point for us as a trust threshold, right? Third lens that we look at in terms of trust is ownership type. As you may or may not know, Edelman is a family-owned, privately held company. I joke that our CEO wanted this question included because he thought that this would prove out. He was right. The most trusted enterprise type in the world, global findings, 71% for family-owned business. Publicly traded, least at 54. 76% trust in the EU for family-owned businesses. Look at the Asia-Pacific numbers by comparison. Big business, state-owned, 74-63. Creators of wealth, creators of opportunity is the perception of the respondent set there, right? Not the family business as the driver. For this market specifically, a critically important number given the predominance of family-owned companies within country. A tremendous leverageable asset from a branding, marketing, communication standpoint to stress the values and the heritage behind that company and how it behaves. And here's a deeper look into the region and the country. Look at this, family-owned 77. 3 in 4 respondents have trust for a family-owned business, while less than 1 in 2 trust big business, while almost 1 in 3 trust the state-owned. So how we position and think about ourselves and our clients is extremely important in describing the values and the way we innately operate, who we are as an enterprise. And why is that? What are behavioral associations? Because we wanted to understand that a little bit more. What makes a publicly traded versus a privately held, family-owned more attractive? Well, more than 54%, or 54% compared to 40%, believe that privately held are more responsive to customers' needs. 62% believe that privately held are entrepreneurial. 58% believe they're innovative. Publicly traded does win on having too much political influence. 3 in 4 respondents say that publicly traded, those bigger companies, have too much political influence. Look at this. Room to work, philanthropic. This is your market data. Spain, 21% and 17%, neither good numbers, believe that publicly traded and privately held are philanthropic enterprises. So clearly, opportunity to improve, opportunity to address a need in market. That said, again, the economic atmosphere definitively going to impact that perception, right? Could they do enough? I'm not certain. Let's look also now at that fourth lens, which is leadership. We explain this leadership because of this extreme low trust factor in the CEO. 43% global findings informed public trust the CEO compared to 67% for an academic expert, a technical expert, which we did not ask in 2009. Or look at this, 15% increase in a person like myself. My Facebook page matters to me. I trust those opinions. Those are people that I know are going through the same things I'm going through, who have the same hopes, dreams, and ambitions that I do. And what they say matters, right? So when I think about engagement, when I think about what we as marketing communications professionals must do, it's that we must create engagement of these third-party voices, right, in terms of being able to advance the objective of the enterprise. Let's look at your number. Your numbers in market, informed publics again. I want to flag something transparently. Successful entrepreneur. I have no idea why we changed the phraseology. I know that the change in phraseology resulted in a 21-point drop. And my theory is that this entrepreneur, in the absence of successful, might be interpreted in a mass market sense as tech entrepreneur. I don't know. That's just a theory. Again, we'd have to do more research. But what I do know is that boards of directors, CEO, and government officials here in Spain continue to drop and sit at the very bottom of this list. I also know that the regular employee is up 7 points year over year. That the that the person like myself is up. 8 in 10 respondents trust a person like me. That's a powerful number in market, a very powerful number for us as marketing communications professionals. I call this slide, Who Lies the Least, right? We wanted to understand why government officials and business leaders were not trusted. We asked, do you trust that a business leader will make an ethical and moral decision? 1 in 5 in Spain said yes. 6 out of 100 said a governmental leader would in market. I see no reason for business leaders to celebrate in proximity to government leaders because these numbers are abysmal. Work to be done. The difference in trust in the leader and the institution, trust in business, trust in the CEO, very different. We have to educate our business leaders on this fact. Let's look at trust in government. For the first time this year, we actually indicate with the gray bar those markets that are at a historic low. Spain, 18%. The Italian market, historic low at 24%. Mexico, 28%. Hong Kong, I talked about earlier, at 45%. This is looking at change again, 2013 to 2014. Lower or equal trust in 17 of our 27 markets. A tremendous continued downfall for many governments in terms of level of trust. And again, as I said earlier, we at Edelman are extremely interested in the intersection and the comparison between business and government. This slide shows in blue the trust in business, global findings informed public for 2014 compared to red, the trust in government. 20-point higher trust in business than government in all of these markets. Now that might create an opportunity, one could suggest, for a call for deregulation. Let us do our thing. Let us go and create opportunity. because trust in government is so low. So how could that not be the strategy? Well, we know that that should not be the strategy because we asked the global respondents, was there enough, not enough, or too much regulation of business? 42% said not enough. 27% said too much. When I look at specific industries, the numbers are even worse. 51% global respondents say not enough regulation of the energy industry. But in the UK, where there was a very loud public debate about fracking over this past year, right? 73% say not enough in the UK. Circumstance matters, and in Spain it matters a great deal. Here's your numbers compared to those global numbers. Same categories. Watch the bars jump up. Not enough, not enough, not enough. Financial services, 3 and 4 respondents. Government regulation of energy industry, not enough, almost 2/3. Why? What do you want? What do the respondents want government to do? Well, 1 in 2, 50%, 30% plus 50% want government to protect them from companies who are behaving badly, from irresponsible practices. Protect me. I don't trust you, government, but I actually trust business less to do the right thing. So these aren't mutually exclusive findings. These are required findings for us to understand a path forward, for us to be effective in our jobs in counseling our business leaders. And for those business leaders who would say, well, government's not trusted, I should simply be quiet. That's not what the Spanish respondents say when it comes to regulation about those industries. When the food and beverage industry is going to be regulated, 2/3 of Spanish respondents believe that they should be involved in governmental conversation about that regulation. Engage, be a part of the conversation. So for 10 years, as I worked at this firm, this would be the end of the presentation. And many of you would say, well, that was interesting data, and what do we do? And I would say, I don't know. So Victor had a model. I have a model. We've spent a great deal of time trying to understand then the path forward, because if we believe the world has changed, we must have an understanding. We must have a path forward to building trust. I believe I started my career 20 years ago in reputation management. I believe the most important thing that I could get clients, CCOs, Chief Communications Officers, and Chief Marketing Officers to understand today is that our work from reputation management and brand building has actually been trumped by the need to build trust. That is a behavioral exercise, that it's not about an ad buy, that it's not about just a feeling, that there's action behind that. And we spent a great deal of time looking at 32 odd or different studies from 20 different countries around the world done by peers and competitors. And we have identified from a behavioral standpoint what we believe to be the 16 attributes that build trust. 16 is a lot. So in the same way that Victor, from a brand standpoint, talked about the 4, we actually bundle our 16 into 5 what we call performance clusters. From most important to least important: engagement, integrity, products and services, purpose, and operations. I want to be really clear. I'm not going to sit down with a CEO or a CFO and tell them that operations do not matter. The lens of importance is on building trust. How do I build trust? What matters in building trust is engagement and integrity. And I know that because I asked respondents the world over the same question about all 16 attributes. I asked them, top bar, how important are each of the 16 attributes? And I asked them, second bar, how is business performing in Spain against those 16 attributes? And I get a gap, and I can create an understanding of the rank order. Engagement in the light blue, clearly 3 of the top 4. Integrity, the next 3. Clearly products and services matter. This is an extremely confusing chart. What do I do with that? I turn it into that, right? I turn it into importance on the y-axis, performance on the x, and I chart the 5 clusters in relationship to one another. I can look back in our 2008 data, and I can see that what was more important and strong performance has diminished in importance in building trust. not in running a profitable enterprise. Be very clear, this conversation is about building trust. And I know that if I want to build trust, I need to have the things that are most important, and I need to be performing against them. The blue and the green need to move to the upper right. So how do I do that? Well, it's about behavior. Now, for researchers in the audience, please don't ask me questions about correlation research, because I'm not a researcher, I'm a communicator. But I understand that what correlation research means, and the validity of this slide, is predicated on the relationship to how a number of questions were asked in relationship one to the other. And I know that by design, my 16 attributes, as you will recall here, are pretty generic, right? Treats employees well. What that means in China is extremely different from what that means in Spain, is extremely different from what that means in Mississippi. Very different. So for an enterprise, I need to understand these generic attributes in the context of my industry at my moment in time. And I need to understand how to move those. What we did was we identified some behaviors. We moved from attribute generic to behavior specific. Pays appropriate level of tax. What does that do? Does it impact? Yes, it's extremely important. 8 in 10 global respondents say that it's important that the enterprise pays the appropriate level of tax. And we know that in relationship to our trust-building performance clusters, that impacts engagement, integrity, and purpose. I can measure this impact. I can measure this move. More importantly, I can prove that positive behaviors impact the two most important trust-building clusters. And it also matters who moves that message. We saw earlier the CEO at the bottom of the trust level from a spokesperson standpoint. Here we looked at content across the clusters, engagement, integrity, the most important, and we asked who was the most trusted influencer to communicate on each. The CEO, the employee, an activist, consumer, academic, or media. 52% employee, 41% integrity. Engaging employees, understanding the objective of the enterprise, and empowering them to engage across social media is critical in order to build trust. Not an opinion, it's a fact. So what is the CEO going to do? Sit in their office? No, they still, that diamond is still predicated on something from top down. The vision of the enterprise, the strategy of the enterprise, the priorities of the enterprise have to be owned at the top. But they must not just be forced, they must come from the bottom up, right? He or she must engage with employees. And this doesn't mean don't be in the media. It just says for a CEO who thinks the only thing they need to do is do the press conference at the time of the big announcement, this is not enough. Again, not our opinion as marketing communication professionals, factual data. We believe that this is all data that supports a new environment. There's been significant change in our jobs over the past 5 years, much less my 20-year experience. We also believe that the job of the CEO has changed. That's the fundamental message that we have to take back to our clients, to our bosses, is that the CEO has got to become the chief engagement officer. Does it mean that their job in totality has changed? No, they're still responsible for vision. Our belief at Edelman is that if the role of the CEO has historically been this large in terms of job responsibility, and communications was this much of it, that in today's world, the transformation that we've seen because of social, digital, etc., means that communications is this much of it. It doesn't mean that the other responsibility sets are gone, but it means that the CEO must create a culture, an atmosphere, and behavior of engagement. That the CEO must be the leader when it comes to speaking to, engaging with NGOs and third parties. That the CEO must resource and decide that internal communications matters. That this is not just a branding exercise. It's not just a PR exercise. That there is no delineation between these two things. That these two things are engaged. These two things are merged. And the CEO has to drive that in the way the organization moves forward. And we believe the three-step process is to participate, advocate, and evaluate in terms of how to move that enterprise forward. So that's a lot of data on a very emotionally based topic. And I hope that gives us a good bit to talk about over the course of the day. And I thank you very much for your time and your attention.